Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I welcome all of you back to the Chris Ann series of 2024. And even at this stage at Christery, where there is still, well, there's sort of like been a bit of a slack in terms of regular updates or very frequent ones, there's still plenty much we still need to know of right now. And I'll just say this as the most passive observer: just observe Christery. Do not partake in it, and do not try to be above or a part of Christery. We do that, and that's like the single best advice I could possibly give. So here's sort of how we do this, and you see here, we start basically from the top here, body. I'll try and make this a little bit bigger. Oops, there we go. We start off with body, with the DRUGS, and then we sort of work all the way down. And there's been some things that have been like added to this, and probably a lot of things being changed during this time. So I hope you're ready, because this is going to be a long one. So, and here's just a quick little mention just before we get started. Chris's recent failings have helped the Cwiki gather more information for this article. Be a winner by adding this information in, and that gives you a place where you can just like log in and do all of that fun stuff. This new information can be found through the following sources: the place chats, and these are things that sort of like just been reappearing, and these are just for more speculation if you want a bit more insight to other things that we should know that Chris has been on or may have taken. So here we go. The despicable mention of rude words and drugs in Song of Christian. Now, a drug is any substance other than food that changes an organism's physiology or psychology when consumed. Much like shoving things up his ass, which we probably might have to get to, although there are receptacle drugs out there, so call that what you will. Recreational drugs were something that Chris used to preach against, until he eventually tried alcohol and discovered he loved the somewhat pleasant effects. As of 2021, Chris has consumed caffeine, cannabis, and alcohol. He has yet to smoke a cigarette or try any hard drugs such as cocaine. That's good, Chris, because I'm just going to make a mention about cocaine right now, is that, do you guys have any idea what actually goes into the production of cocaine? They cook it in petrol. You don't put petrol in your body, ladies and gentlemen. That goes in my car engine. You don't do that. So if ever there was a good reason not to do cocaine, that is it. Chris has also been on a litany of prescription and over-the-counter drugs to treat his various ailments. And dear Lord, there are so many of them, but we'll get to them in a different article. So as you can see right here, this is just his prescriptions, his alcohol intake, his tobacco. Then those get to things like cannabis, caffeine, and of course his references. Prescription drugs. Prescriptions for mental health specifically, which can be found on the main autism article, which again, that's an entirely different subject for another day. Due to Chris's autism, he has had to take a variety of prescription drugs over the years. As of the year 2000, Chris has been taking the antidepressant Paxil for his autism, which increased from 20 milligrams to 30 milligrams after his psychiatric diagnosis. But sometime before December 2009, he'd stopped taking it, and instead began taking paroxetine, citing Paxil's side effects. Interestingly enough, both have the same chemical composition, meaning both are the same drug with different trade names. If word ever gets out that Chris felt paroxetine didn't have the same side effects as Paxil, know that this is just an example of the placebo effect. It is possible that Paxil or paroxetine's side effects included making orgasm harder and increased potential for weight gain. Well, considering Chris's diet and his inability to even so much as lift a finger without, sweating, that might be the case anyway. Sometime afterwards, Barb found out about its side effects and switched to fluoxetine. It is likely she switched relatively recently, as she still mentioned paroxetine well into October of 2017. In that same paper, it also mentioned his taking of imipramine for unknown reasons. Prescriptions for other ailments. For the majority of his life, Chris had no cholesterol problems. To combat this, instead of eating like a normal human being and getting exercise, He eats poorly and rarely exercises, while taking Lipitor, a cholesterol-lowering drug. While Lipitor and similar drugs can have a positive effect in lowering cholesterol levels of those taking it, if one doesn't change their lifestyle, as well as there will be little change in the cholesterol level. Chris, having taken Lipitor since at least August of 2009, has had some improvements with his cholesterol levels. Getting a source of 140 milligrams per milliliter, while not low, is not high either. Since Chris is very unfit, it's likely that Lipitor seems to be doing a decent job. It's worth noting, as Casey and her dad pointed out, he started taking the drug in his 20s, when it and other statins are really meant for people above age 40, and are only recommended for younger patients when the risk of early cardiovascular disease is that high. It'll be interesting to know exactly if this was also Bob's idea, or did Bob want Sir Chris to go on Lipitor. It's possible. I mean, even during this period, Bob was early 80s, and you got to think even during that period, it must have been on his mind somewhat. I mean, he sadly didn't have much long left to live at that point. Sad but true. Chris also takes a drug to combat blood pressure, likely a blood thinning concerning his fat-high diet. It is known that Chris also takes antibiotics for his UTIs, or urinary tract infections. Not a very pleasant thing. HRT. Ever since May of 2015, Chris has been taking various forms of hormone replacement therapy, or HRT, to successfully transition. Spoiler alert, it's been nearly 9 years since at least he started taking HRT, and, well, we'll get to what might be irreversible effects that because of Chris not having taken it properly or not getting the right sort of treatment, although that might be down to a cost-saving measure because of the nature of Chris wanting to transition. Estrogel. Normally, the transgender person may plan out their gender transitions with doctors to ensure safety throughout the process, especially of the taking hormones. They don't go see people like Dr. Nick or Harold Shipman for that matter, for that reason. Unfortunately, Chris did the opposite. In 2015, he acquired Estrogel, a hormone replacement therapy cream meant for post-menopausal women. Maybe he just stole it from Bob or something, I don't know. It is meant to be prescription only, but Chris got around the requirement to see a doctor by ordering through offshore pharmacy. Estrogel has high health risks, such as fluid retention, weight changes, rise in blood pressure, potentially disastrous for an obese person like Chris that probably not even Lipitor could combat, and blood clots. And that is when it is applied properly via a very small dosage on the arm once per day. He even managed to fail at following the directions on the packet, as shown in Estrogel application and vibrating bra how-to, in which he slathers the cream onto his stomach like buttering bread, as he puts it. And by the way, yeah, we're just straight up, I don't even think, can we even view this? Please, for the love of God, tell me wait a minute, did I miss something? Go to Violet for transition. Okay, that's the... So, I will say this, is that Violet 4151 is that if you did want to sort of go into a little bit more detail about those who actually are transitioning and those who are doing it properly, then there's your answer. And I don't think it's worth... You could see this on, like, Gino Samuel's, like, I think it's, like, part 45 of his documentary he does this. And also captures the fact that Chris, who looks like he's just had a lot of seaweed dumped on his head, and not particularly looking very clever, as he just sort of lathers his belly with Estrogel. He even managed to fail... Okay, Kim Wilson revealed that he was taking the hormones in May of 2015. And Chris mentioned the drug again as late as August of 2016. Throughout 2015 to 16, he repeatedly complained via Facebook posts of feeling dizzy and ill, but failed to connect the dots and think it could be caused by taking overdosages of a black market drug without a physician's approval, which, is not particularly out of the question, because of the cavalcade of drugs that Chris has had to take for his health. I mean, I've never really heard of like people having to take like medication for autism. Only like maybe in more extreme cases. I mean, I've never had to do that, but that's not ruling out Chris. I mean, I could go into detail about how they said I was like on the very low end of the spectrum, but to me, that makes no real difference as far as I'm concerned. If you have it, you have it. But then again, that might be for other issues that we might be getting into. Proper HRT. At some point in fall of 2016, he finally went to a medical professional and was prescribed proper HRT. In his interview with Copper Cab, Chris mentions he takes the testosterone blocker for okay, hang on, let me see if I can... Spironolactone, which he nicknames Spyro the Dragon, the estradiol to assist in transitioning. Okay, so we're just going to say he's been taking Spyro. That's probably the best way. Alcohol. Background. Like many things in his life, Chris has drastically changed his feelings about intoxicating beverages over the years. Chris once described alcohol as a slow-acting poison in his Future Message video. He also touched on the subject during Vivitag's AIM chat, where in line 309, he mentioned that he would not go to a singles bar because of it and cigarettes. When asked about alcohol in Mumble Chat 2, he stated that it causes liver dysfunction and likely bar fights and automobile accidents. Well, if you, like... But then again, he's, for some reason, Chris seems to think that if you step into a bar, you're going to come out turning into George Best post-England career. You know what I mean? Chris delivered a particularly effusive tirade in one of his single emails to Reggie, Fields, and me. Also, I bet you probably smoke and drink, don't you? I speak against those as well as those who are tools to speed you to death with cancer, liver problems, bar fights, and automobile accidents. Give up the habits. They are beyond gross and disgusting. In early of 2009. And this was him later in 2009 when he finally actually had a drink. I don't know if that's a caterpillar crawling up his up the side of his head, but it's very, very distracting. Keep it responsible, only once a day. And by the way, this is him having his quote-unquote first ever Long Island iced tea. His teeth don't look to particularly do good either. Discovery and use. Despite his initial feelings about alcohol, a hypocritical video of Chris drinking a Long Island iced tea was uploaded to YouTube on the 12th of June 2009, showing us signs that perhaps Chris is willing to throw all his principles out the window when it comes to chance to impress a female arises. Of course, it didn't work out, I'll just say that much, because again, Chris has never really dropped his habit of touching people inappropriately. You know what? If this was 2019 and not 2009, Chris probably would have been in prison a long time ago. That type of cocktail isn't recommended for novice drinkers, however, due to having a rather strong amount of alcoholic ingredients like vodka, triple sec, rum, tequila, and gin. It's possible that Chris chose it because he assumed, due to its name, that it was literally just iced tea. Alcohol was mentioned briefly in a video shortly after entitled, "I'm Sorry Dude." In this video, Chris makes an offer to treat Logan to drinks as opposed to his past offers of coffee or soda, to those whom he wanted to get to know. Alcohol was briefly revisited again on camera in Chris's Big Night Out 2, where Chris was seen drinking. Chris's first recorded video where he appeared visibly intoxicated was Bless the Fans, Curse the Trolls. Alcohol began a slow and steady progression into Chris's life. This was made obvious in an email to Regina, where he said, "I've also tasted Mike's Hard Lemonade, Budweiser, Miller Michelob, and Samuel Adams and a couple of others, and I am looking forward to sampling more varieties of liquor." God, this guy drinks more than me. You know what I mean? Budweiser is apparently his brand of choice, based on eyewitnesses' reports from Fridays After 5 and his account of a trip to a bar prior to visiting the game place on the 6th of June 2010, where the one that Chris admitted to drinking and then driving a car. And there was no females involved in that either, which is considering that, again, Chris was threw that principle out the window for no reason whatsoever. Meanwhile, a video from mid-October 2010 showed Chris slugging Kahula straight from the bottle, although he didn't seem to enjoy it much. When a correspondent to Mailbag 6 challenged him regarding his shift in attitude, Chris replied, "I discourage underage drinking fully. I wanted to try it once for myself." In Mailbag 16 from December 2009, he described his drinking habits in more detail. "I am more of a social drinker," he says. "I generally do not spend a weekly amount on drinks. I only drink at like a party or with a friend on rare occasions." Considering how rare we're talking about, so that might not be much to boast either. This remark was met with some skepticism from trolls, since Chris has no friends, much less any who would invite him to parties. And even if he did, probably Chris would be like that one meme where it's like a bunch of parties and he's like in the corner with a drink and he's saying, "And none of these people know I created Solitude." You know what I mean? Even after discarding his original hardline attitude, though, Chris still found opportunities to get a little preachy regarding the demon liquor. In Mailbag 33 from early January of 2010, he remarked, "And alcohol in responsible, moderate amounts. It can be good for you. Yet I do not support too much of it. As if left unchecked, unresponsible, or unassisted, too much can lead to fights that can lead to a trip to the hospital and automobile accidents." He also, in Mailbag 5, advanced the bizarre theory that drinking while pregnant can provoke homosexuality in the child. I'm sorry. How Chris could... You know what, it's too late at night to think about moving on. On the 6th of June 2010, Chris revealed that he had been drinking at a bar after driving to the game place and getting into a confrontation with a manager. Alcohol may be contributing to Chris's declining health. Already declining health, but fair enough so. Since his decision to leave the internet and instead seek real-life interaction, Chris has revealed to us that he spent most of his day sitting in bars and playing on his Nintendo DSi. While he once claimed to be a social drinker, it is becoming quite obvious that he is anything but. Chris's childlike perception of the world is most likely deafening his awareness to the substance's advance of relevancy in his life. At this point, he may be turning to alcohol for escapism. Or escapism, I should say. I do apologize. Also, alcoholism has been proven to be a telltale sign of Peter Pan syndrome, which clearly applies to Chris. In addition, Chris, being the slow in the mind that he is alleged to add raw sugar to his beer on a regular basis. Why the hell would anyone do that? Not even the people who, like, put at least 4 spoonfuls of sugar into tea would even go that far. I mean, I've seen that done, but why? Why would you want to, like, it just destroys the taste. Not only is this unnecessary, but may lead to further problems in the near future, let alone, again, Chris's teeth. It is obvious that with Chris's current loneliness and depression, his alcohol use may yield repercussions in his life. And it did. In July of 2016, Chris, while thought to have been drunk and depressed over lack of progress of his gender transition, sliced open his taint with a knife to stimulate the opening of a vagina. I've covered all that story before. It is about as depressing and as fucked up as it sounds, because Chris very nearly got himself killed. I don't know why he was drunk, or he had it in mind anyway and just needed, like, something to calm the nerves. Alcohol made another appearance in the Cwiki Enchant performance, in which Chris states he had 5 swigs of vodka. I doubt that. I've got like at least 3 bottles of whiskey downstairs. I could barely do 1 shot, but I'll take Chris's... No, I won't take his word for that because I don't believe that. The Teen Drone Squad, aged 18 to 19, tried to get Chris to buy them Reeb in 2018. In 2021, enabler Kawaii Sandbag revealed that Chris had told him in messages that he would drink heavily once every few weeks. Even though with known accounts of Chris's past alcohol use, this news was surprising and very concerning. I agree. The holy labels which Chris has been sending to fans from jail are expressly intended to be used for drinking non-alcoholic beverages. This is a strange inversion of the Christian rite of Holy Communion, which most Christian denominations celebrate using wine, although some Protestant denominations use non-alcoholic grape juice. Well, I would admit I've never, but that may be more Protestant churches, so call that what you will. It really, actually, I wonder if it's ever got to the case of Chris that he can get a free drink when he ever goes down to the church, but I don't think he's been since at least 2013, to my knowledge. Chandler family and alcohol. It is interesting to note that Cole Smithy mentions that Bob and Barbara Chandler met at a bar and acted like a couple of drunken losers. The Chandlers' pre-fire family room had memorabilia from various brewing companies, including Ballantine and Bass, indicating that Chris's parents never shared his antipathy to alcohol even in their old age. Chris's family line has a history with alcohol. Chris's maternal great-grandfather, Robert Pettis Wynn, drank heavily and had a girlfriend during the time he was married. Family stories say he failed to provide even the most basic support for his wife and children. There are others who say he was a moonshiner. Might possibly. And look at this. The official drink of Kick the Autistic. And yeah, and this is Chris when going down to 4-cent garbage. They're all drinking Reeb. In Solitude, Chris refers to beer in all instances as Reeb, which is just beer, spelled backwards. He probably thought this little immortalnap very clever. At first glance, this seems odd, until you realise Chris was under the impression that Solitude was targeted towards children. Never really was, not even probably to Chris. Despite the graphic sex scene in issue 8, and frequent depictions of violent death, and so, he feels he must censor any mention of alcohol in the comics. This is a common theme in English-translated anime shows such as Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon. Absolutely. Particularly those aimed at a younger audience. Possessing or drinking alcohol was also one of the worst crimes to commit in Quickville, and could have led to a $1,500 fine or 10 years in prison. The economy must be so up its own arse in Quickville that I'm surprised. I would have probably just taken the fine. Oh dear, 10 years in prison just for that. The fact that Chris thinks that 10 years in prison and a $1,500 fine are interchangeable is indicative of his broader attitude towards money. It is also interesting to note that this punishment is much more lenient than Quickville's the penalty for homosexuality. And you thought Chris was intolerant. Yeah, right. Chris later said in his Rolling a Trolling video that the prohibition had since been repealed. Oh, that's a relief. Reeb is the drink of choice for the drunkards working at 4centgarbage.com. It should also be noted that there really is a drink called Reeb. Yeah, Chinese beer produced in Shanghai, though it's doubtful Chris knew it, and no smoking and want woman, two of Chris's war cries, and just, oh, for God's, really, just like, picture can speak 1,000 words, can't it? And smoking will eventually cause cancer, and you'll be more likely to get heart attacks, viruses, and your life will be cut drastically short. They don't call cigarettes and cigars death sticks for nothing, other than killing you slowly. If I could, I would take every last ounce of tobacco, put them on a rocket, and shoot them up to the moon. Chris. That's quite a nice looking ashtray right there he's got. Tobacco, called tobacco by Chris, is a recreational drug derived from nicotiana plants. If Chris could, he would send... Okay, so basically he's just saying blah blah blah, he's going to send them to the moon. Given his flip-flopping regarding his hatred of alcohol, it is uncertain whether Chris has ever smoked, although he did pretend to smoke a peace pipe for Jackie. Very... I don't smoke either, it's just dry throat and all that. Chris on tobacco. In his famous future message of the 24th of February 2007, Chris expressed his wish for all tobacco to be shot to the moon. In an ED edit from the 10th of November 2007, regarding a comment about Christian Weston Chandler's future message, Chris said he was uncomfortable saying the word tobacco. I don't really know why, but let's hear his reasons why. I have given thought of sending the tobacco to the sun, but then the smell from all that would likely emit from the giant star and stink up our galaxy, possibly shortening the lifespan not only around our world, but the other 8 planets as well. Chris thinking that there's other life on other planets, or the fact that the sun is somehow a star, is whatever. Chris wasn't particularly very good at science, was he? Or astronomy, or space. Chris has also related a dream what he once had regarding the risks posed by tobacco consumption. I was in a factory and I watched people lying on a conveyor belt with their mouths full of cigarettes, going through burning ovens, coming out signed not on fire, then dunked into a huge tank of alcohol that dissolved them to dust, like acid would do. And their remains would come out of the factory's smokestacks in puffs of smoke and ashes. And another detail, the front of the factory is skull-shaped. So, yeah, it's basically like Dr. Wily's castle right here. Why are there bones sticking out of Dr. Wily's castle? That's, like, a bit ominous, wouldn't you say? Chris has stated that tobacco and alcohol importation is the most severe crime in Cwikville and warrants 10 years imprisonment or $1,500 fine. In short, importing cigarettes is worse than rape, theft, or murder, or even being a homosexual in Cwikville. Ironically, one of Chris's own ancestors was a tobacco farmer, according to his death certificate. That's quite funny. Maybe that was the one where Chris thought he had a Cherokean heritage. You never know, eh? Cannabis. Chris seemed to have an even stronger hatred for cannabis, also known as marijuana, pot, or weed. Despite its being hailed as a possible autism treatment, but, don't ever tell Chris this is evidenced by the fact that in Cwikville, cigarette smokers are only given a $1,500 fine as before, but those who simply possess weed are taken to a maximum security prison, the same place Cwikville detains terrorist leaders. As was the fate of Kathleen in the book 10 Replacement. Interestingly, the Jamaican war veteran Enos from the original Solitude issue 10 somehow managed to escape in the sentence, instead being forced into a soup hotel by Ultra Solitude. Dialogue indicates it was because Solitude believed he was actually smoking tobacco, despite him being high as a kite, unintentionally revealing that Chris may believe tobacco and cannabis to be interchangeable. Probably. The fact that Wacky Tobacco was used as a name for cannabis back in the 1940s and 50s further adds weight to this theory. I wonder if Chris has, maybe Chris ever watched the movie Reefer Madness, and maybe he thought to himself, yeah, that they're both the same, they're all bad, so all under the same handle, everything is a Class A drug. In true Chris hypocritical fashion, it was revealed by Kim on Facebook that in July 2016, Chris had tried smoking cannabis at OmegaCon and was offered it at Impulse as well. Chris confirmed that he did try weed a couple of times in a Twitter comment. Thanks, not totally my thing, that kind of high, the couple of times aside. Just mentioning things in passing is quite modern for Chris, to be honest, as well. Things that he probably shouldn't be, mentioning, but, he is his own man. He's 44 years of age. No, he's only 40. He's only 42 coming up. Am I right? Yeah, that must be right. Under the influence of the idea guy, Chris changed Solitude's official birthday to the 20th of April or 420, often celebrated as a stoner holiday. However, given the idea guy's apparent obsession with Nazis and other offensive topics, this could also be a reference to the birthday of Adolf Hitler or the date of the 1999 Columbine High School massacre. In 2018, Chris smoked pot with the Teen Troon Squad, hanging out at their house to partake. Virginia legalized weed at a state level in July of 2021. Even though, again, this was the same month, this is at the end of the month was when Chris was arrested, so he basically missed out on this, making it the first southern state to do so. However, Chris spent most of the month hooked on a different vice, which is still very much illegal. Oh, that's mean, that is. And finally, caffeine. Being an avid Coca-Cola drinker, Chris is no stranger to caffeine consumption, though he curiously denied using caffeine in the autism papers. his heavy soda consumption is likely to blame for his disordered sleep patterns. Notably, the 2014 house fire started after Chris tried to brew coffee in the bathroom early in the morning, causing a frayed extension cord to spark and set the house on fire. Way to go, Chris. You couldn't just leave well enough alone. But I'm telling you this now, guys, he was not doing it to look for work. That's for sure. Because even to this day, ladies and gentlemen, it's been at least 5,000 days since Chris at least applied for work. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the Chris and drugs section. So it's a kind of a very sad state of affairs. I don't even know why I bothered putting those on. Is that, like quite a lot of people who seemingly have not terribly much to live for, Chris turns to only one of the few things that can give him some actual joy. And given with what we went over with like Peter Pan syndrome and his need for escapism because of Chris's very tenuous grasp on or off reality, it just about might be the only thing he's got to look forward to, and that has fueled his delusions as well as fueled his rapid rise from the cradle to the grave. So, you know, as they say, you know what, winners don't do drugs, ladies and gentlemen. And that's just about that. And I cannot wait to see all of you guys again in the next video. Take care, and bye-bye for now.